There's so many different pet insurance companies out there and premiums are all different. So how can you know exactly what you're getting and which the best pet insurance is for you and your pet? And the first one is from Pam, who writes that she's from Knoxville, Tennessee, and she's asking which insurance company is good for a cat or for her dog. So I'll start off by saying that pet insurance policies, they're really not all equal, and they do vary in a number of different ways, and that's going to be by country as well. There may be different options depending on where you live, but by and large, pet insurance policies, they vary by the excess that there is, so the amount that you need to pay or the amount that the bill needs to be before they will consider accepting a claim and making payment for that treatment. Co-payments are another thing that varies. So a co-payment is a certain percentage of the bill that you may have to pay. So it might be that, for example, there's an excess of $100 and a 20% co-payment. Now that would mean that for any bill that you submit, you would have to pay the first $100 of treatment, and then for anything else, you'd have to pay 20% of the total bill. Other things is what's covered by this insurance policy. So are all surgical procedures covered? Is it only medical cover that you're given, or vice versa? Sometimes you can get just surgical only procedures, which is great if your dog or your cat breaks a leg, but it's not very good if they get diabetes or have arthritis or they develop a complicated medical condition where their treatment is not going to be covered. The total amount covered is clearly another thing that's going to change by policy. So are they only covering you up to $1,000, for example, and whatever your currency, I'd suggest that that's really not enough. $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, there's different amounts there that can be covered. And then is that amount covered per condition? So is it that amount in total if they break a leg, and then if they get another problem later on the year, is that also covered up to that total amount covered, or is it per year? So do you have a $10,000 in your pet's treatment pot, for example, and if you use $8,000 on fixing a broken leg, there's only $2,000 left if something else comes along. So that's something else to really kind of question and to be clear on with what's being covered. And then finally, exclusion. So if we're getting insurance when our pet is young, and ideally we should be, there's not going to be any exclusions based on their previous conditions because they'll have been nice and healthy. But are there exclusions based on breed, or are there low dollar limits placed on certain common illnesses or diseases that your dog might get because of their breed? For example, some policies I've seen have a really low amount that they'll cover for cruciate ligament rupture, and the amount that's covered actually doesn't cover the cost of the best treatment option. So there's lots to consider when we're looking at insurance policies, and that goes for insurance for anything, be that house insurance, contents insurance, vehicle insurance, they're all different. So it's important that we are very clear about what's covered, about how much that's going to cost you, and what that cost then provides for your pet should they become unwell. We really need to weigh up all of these factors when comparing which policy is best for you. So we can't just decide based on a monthly cost, because the low cost ones, are unlikely to provide the best cover possible for your pet becoming unwell. There may still be very severe limits on what treatment's able to be provided for them, and that's clearly not something we want to happen if we're insuring our pets in the first place. So also talk to your vet as well. While they may not be able to give you any specific advice, and it may be that actually legally they're not allowed to give you specific advice because they're not financial advisors, and again that will depend on the country that you're living in, are there any companies that they're happy to accept direct claims from? So some companies are really poor at approving claims. Some take an awful lot of time to pay out. So it might be that you submit a claim and you only get that money back 6 months later. Some clients have also been known to ring up after a claim's been submitted and then ask the insurance company to pay them rather than the vet, which was what was previously agreed. And all these issues mean that in many cases, unfortunately, direct claims are not accepted, and so that you will need to pay for the cost of your pet's treatment at the time they need their treatment, and then be responsible for claiming that back yourself. In a lot of cases, it's just too risky for the veterinarian to accept that direct claim because it may not be approved, payment may not be made, payment may take an awful long time, and unfortunately some people may try and get the money directly after having said that they're happy for their vet to be paid directly. So talking to your vet and seeing if there's any companies that they're happy to accept direct claims from is also something to consider. And then finally, let's just talk about briefly alternatives to insurance. So insurance is a fantastic way of making sure that you've got the means to pay for your pet's treatment for whatever their pet's treatment. Like I say, if you do need to pay everything up front, then that may not be possible. It may still involve credit cards or other forms of loan just to cover the bill initially before then getting refunded, certainly that initial fee. Another option is to keep a savings account for your pet, and every month, every fortnight, whatever it is, making a payment into that account so that should something happen, you've got some money in the pot. The problem with this approach clearly is that if something happens in the first few years of your pet's life when there's not very much in the account, that's not going to be any help. You're not going to be able to afford to cover that treatment. But there are other ways, and then also you can consider credit cards and loans and things like that if you're in a position to be able to get credit and to be able to afford to get credit as well. Because whenever we're taking on debt, we really need to be aware of how much that's costing us long term and how that's going to affect us long term. So while that's not a pet specific problem, it's definitely something we should be thinking about when it comes to planning on how we're going to look after our pets should they become unwell.
You've been watching the Dr. Alex Answers video podcast. Remember to subscribe and head over to dralexanswers.com for any links, downloads, and get your question answered.